In the mystical lands of ancient Ireland, where the winds carried the whispers of the gods and the hills were steeped in legend, the island was ruled by the mighty Tuatha Dé Danann. These were no ordinary rulers. They were gods, masters of magic and warriors of great power, who walked the earth and shaped the destiny of their land and its people. The world of the Celts was rich with mystery, where nature was alive with spirits, and the skies seemed to open pathways to realms beyond the mortal eye. Among the many treasures of the Tuatha Dé Danann was the famed Cauldron of Plenty, a magical artifact that could feed armies, heal the wounded, and restore life. This cauldron belonged to Dagda, the god of life and abundance, whose presence was as vast as the sky and as bountiful as the earth. The cauldron was the very essence of fertility and prosperity. It was said that no warrior ever left it hungry, and its powers could heal the sick and bring the dead back to life. It was one of the 4 sacred treasures of the gods, alongside the Stone of Destiny, the Spear of Lugh, and the Sword of Nuada. But the peaceful days of bounty were not to last. A dark force, the chaotic Fomorians, enemies of the Tuatha Dé Danann, descended upon the land. These monstrous beings, led by their fearsome king Balor of the Evil Eye, were known for their destructive powers and their thirst for control. In the heat of battle, the gods fought valiantly to protect their treasures, but amidst the chaos, the Cauldron of Plenty was lost, stolen away by the Fomorians and taken to their hidden island fortress far beyond the western sea. Without the cauldron, the land began to wither, crops failed, and famine threatened the people. The gods knew they must act quickly to retrieve the sacred artifact, for without it, the balance of life itself was at risk. Thus began the epic quest to reclaim the Cauldron of Plenty, a journey that would take the gods and their warriors across treacherous seas, through hostile lands, and into the very heart of enemy territory. The fate of the island rested on their shoulders, and the journey would test their strength, wisdom, and resolve like never before. Chapter 1. The Legend of the 4 Treasures. The ancient myths of the Tuatha Dé Danann told of 4 magical treasures, each with its own unique power, each a symbol of the divine authority of the gods. These treasures had been brought to Ireland from the 4 great cities of the otherworld, Phalias, Gorias, Phineas, and Murias, mystical realms hidden from the eyes of men. From Phalias came the Stone of Destiny, Lugh, which roared with approval when the rightful king of Ireland touched it. From Gorias came the Spear of Lugh, a weapon so powerful that no battle could be lost when it was wielded. From Phineas came the Sword of Nuada, a blade that was invincible in battle, and from Murias came the Cauldron of the Dagda, the most treasured of all, for it was a source of endless sustenance and life. Each of these treasures symbolized an aspect of rulership: the spear and the sword for victory in battle, the stone for rightful kingship, and the cauldron for the prosperity of the land. The gods wielded these treasures with wisdom and care, ensuring that balance was maintained between the forces of life and death, order and chaos. But among all the treasures, the Cauldron of Plenty was the most revered. It was said to be as vast as a lake, and no matter how much was taken from it, it never emptied. Whether it was warriors returning from battle or the gods themselves, all who ate from the cauldron were satisfied. More than just food, the cauldron represented the life force of the island itself, providing health and vitality to all. Without it, the land began to wither, and famine swept across the once green hills of Ireland. The loss of the cauldron had been a devastating blow to the Tuatha Dé Danann. The gods had once ruled unchallenged, but the rise of the Fomorians, the monstrous beings who embodied chaos and destruction, threatened to undo everything they had built. Led by the terrifying Balor, a giant with a single deadly eye, the Fomorians sought to dominate the land and enslave its people. They had long coveted the Cauldron of Plenty, knowing that with it they could control the life force of the land itself. In the final battle between the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians, the cauldron had been taken by the enemy. The Fomorians, cunning and cruel, had used the chaos of battle to steal it away, retreating to their island fortress across the sea, where they now guarded it with dark magic and monstrous creatures. The Tuatha Dé Danann were left weakened, their people suffering, and their lands barren. The gods knew that without the cauldron, their power would fade, and the land would fall into ruin. But there was still hope. The ancient prophecies spoke of a time when the gods would be tested, when they would be called upon to reclaim the cauldron and restore life to the land. The time had come to fulfill that prophecy. Dagda, the great father of the gods, called forth a council of the mightiest warriors and gods to undertake the perilous journey to retrieve the cauldron. The stakes were high, and the path ahead was fraught with danger, but the gods had no choice. The cauldron must be returned, or all would be lost. Chapter 2. The Assembly of Heroes. In the sacred halls of Brunaboyne, where the Tuatha Dé Danann gathered in times of great need, Dagda stood before his fellow gods and warriors. His voice, deep and commanding, echoed through the stone chambers as he spoke of the quest that lay ahead. The cauldron must be recovered, and only the bravest and wisest among them could hope to succeed in such a perilous task. One by one, the greatest of the Tuatha Dé Danann stepped forward, pledging their loyalty to the cause. Lugh, the god of light and skill, was the first to offer his hand. Lugh was known as a master of all crafts, a warrior without equal, and his mighty spear, the Spear of Lugh, was said to never miss its mark. He had defeated the Fomorians before, and he vowed to do so again. His eyes burned with determination as he stepped forward, his spear gleaming in the dim light. Next came Nuada, the king of the gods, who wielded the Sword of Light, an invincible blade that had seen countless battles. Nuada had lost his arm in a previous war with the Fomorians, but with a magical silver arm crafted by the god Dian Sect, he had returned to lead the gods once more. His strength and leadership were unmatched, and his presence brought hope to the assembly. The goddess Brigid, daughter of Dagda, also stepped forward. Known for her wisdom and healing powers, Brigid was revered as a goddess of healing, poetry, and smithcraft. Her presence was essential, for the journey ahead would require not only warriors, but those with the power to heal the wounded and restore balance. She carried with her the knowledge of herbs and the power of words, and it was said that her songs could bring the dead back to life. Ogma, the god of strength and eloquence, joined the assembly as well. He was known for his wisdom and his ability to speak with the power of the gods. Ogma had once invented the ancient script known as Ogham, and his strength in battle was as great as his knowledge of words. He would be the one to solve any riddles or puzzles they encountered on their journey. With these heroes gathered, Dagda felt the first stirrings of hope. But the journey would not be easy. The cauldron was hidden in the fortress of the Fomorians, guarded by beasts and dark magic. The island itself was said to be unreachable, shrouded in mists and surrounded by treacherous seas. Only the bravest would survive the journey, and even then there were no guarantees of success. Dagda raised his staff and spoke the words of the prophecy. Only those who walk the path of shadows will find the light. Only those who face the storm will find the calm. The cauldron awaits, but it must be earned. The gods and warriors bowed their heads, ready to embark on the quest that would determine the fate of their people. The journey had begun. Chapter 3. The Voyage Across the Sea. The dawn was pale and cold as the assembled gods and warriors stood upon the shores of Eire, looking out over the vast expanse of the western sea. The air was thick with the salt of the ocean, and a steady wind tugged at their cloaks. The sea, once a symbol of freedom and bounty, now seemed foreboding, for it was the same waters that led to the island fortress of the Fomorians. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Cauldron of Plenty lay hidden, guarded by dark forces. Dagda stood at the helm of their great ship, a vessel blessed by the god of the seas, Manannán mac Lir, and crafted by the finest artisans of the Tuatha Dé Danann. The ship's hull was enchanted with the charms of protection, its sails woven with magic to catch the winds of the gods. Though the sea was vast and treacherous, they trusted in Manannán's guidance, for he had promised to steer them through the perils that awaited. As the heroes boarded the ship, the crew unfurled the sails, and the ship glided smoothly into the open waters. The rhythmic sound of the waves against the hull and the steady pull of the wind filled the air as the ship moved farther from the shores of Ireland. But even as they set sail, a feeling of unease settled over the crew. The Fomorians were known for their dark magic, and the seas were not empty of their influence. Lugh stood at the bow, his keen eyes scanning the horizon. "There is something out there," he said quietly to Nuada, who stood beside him. "The Fomorians will not let us pass unchallenged." Nuada, with his silver arm gleaming in the rising sun, nodded. "We must be ready for whatever comes. This sea is theirs as much as ours." As the day wore on, the sky darkened, and a thick mist began to creep across the waters. The crew shivered as the mist swallowed the ship, cutting off all sight of the horizon. The wind, once steady and sure, began to falter, leaving the ship adrift in the silent gray fog. The gods and warriors stood ready, knowing that the Fomorians would strike when the time was right. And strike they did. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently as a massive maelstrom opened in the water ahead of them. The swirling vortex of the sea seemed to reach up like a giant's hand, intent on dragging the ship down into the abyss. The crew struggled to steer the ship away, but the pull of the maelstrom was too strong. "Hold fast!" Lugh shouted, raising his spear high. The air around him crackled with energy as he summoned the power of the Tuatha Dé Danann. With a swift motion, he hurled the spear into the heart of the maelstrom. The magical weapon glowed with a fierce light as it struck the center of the vortex, and for a moment the maelstrom faltered. But the sea was not so easily tamed. From the depths of the vortex rose a giant sea serpent, its scales glistening like black obsidian and its eyes glowing with malevolent fire. The creature's massive body coiled around the ship, its fanged maw opening wide as it prepared to strike. Dagda, standing at the helm, raised his great club, ready to defend the ship. But it was Brigid who acted first. She stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. Her voice, soft but filled with power, called out to the serpent in the ancient language of the gods. "We do not seek battle," she said, her words carrying through the mist like a melody. "We seek what was taken from us, and we ask only for safe passage." For a moment the serpent hesitated, as if Brigid's words had reached some deep part of its primal mind. But the influence of the Fomorians was strong, and the creature's eyes narrowed with rage. It struck with blinding speed, its jaws aiming for the heart of the ship. Just as the serpent lunged, Nuada leaped forward, his sword of light flashing in the dim light of the mist. With a single stroke, he slashed at the serpent's neck, the blade cutting through the thick scales with ease. The serpent let out a deafening roar of pain and fury, but it did not relent. Instead, it coiled tighter around the ship, threatening to crush it beneath its weight. As the battle raged, the ship was tossed back and forth, and the crew struggled to keep it afloat. The serpent's body was like iron, and for every strike of Nuada's sword or Dagda's club, it seemed to grow stronger. Then, from the depths of the sea, came a voice, deep and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. Manannan Mac Lir, god of the sea, had heard their call. The waters around the ship began to glow with an ethereal light, and the serpent, sensing the presence of the sea god, recoiled in fear. "Be gone, creature of the deep," Manannan's voice boomed. "These travelers are under my protection." With a final roar, the serpent released its hold on the ship and disappeared beneath the waves, vanishing into the depths of the sea. The maelstrom began to subside, and the mist slowly lifted, revealing a clear path ahead. The ship, though battered, remained afloat, and the heroes breathed a collective sigh of relief. Dagda stepped forward, his expression grave. "We have only just begun, and already the Fomorians seek to thwart us, but we cannot turn back." Brigid, her face calm despite the chaos, nodded. "The sea has tested us, and we have passed the trial, but greater challenges lie ahead." With Manannan guiding them, the ship continued its journey across the sea. But the gods knew that their greatest trials were yet to come, for the island of the Fomorians lay ahead, an island shrouded in darkness and guarded by the most fearsome of creatures. Chapter 4. The Island of the Fomorians. As the ship neared the island of the Fomorians, the sea began to change. The waters, once dark and deep, now glistened with an unnatural green hue, as if the ocean itself had been poisoned by the malevolent magic of the island. The skies above turned gray and turbulent, casting a shadow over the approaching shoreline. It was clear to all aboard the ship that they had entered a realm of chaos, where nature bent to the will of the dark forces that ruled the land. The island loomed ahead, its jagged cliffs rising out of the mist like the bones of some ancient beast. The rocky shoreline was littered with twisted black trees and the remnants of ships that had dared to challenge the Fomorians and failed. In the distance, atop a high ridge, the Fomorian fortress stood, its stone walls dark and foreboding, like a scar upon the land. This was the seat of power for Balor of the Evil Eye, the monstrous leader of the Fomorians, whose gaze could turn warriors to stone and whose heart knew no mercy. The air was thick with tension as the ship approached the island. Even the gods, who had fought many battles, could feel the oppressive weight of the island's magic. They knew that to set foot on this cursed land was to invite danger beyond anything they had faced before. Yet their mission was clear. They had come to reclaim the Cauldron of Plenty, and no force, no matter how dark, could stop them. As the ship docked at a hidden cove, the heroes disembarked, stepping onto the black sand with caution. Lugh was the first to set foot on the island, his spear gleaming in the dim light as he scouted the area. Behind him, Nuada, Brigid, Ogma, and Dagda followed, their weapons drawn and their senses alert. The wind carried strange whispers, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord, as if the island itself were alive with malevolent intent. "The fortress lies ahead," Lugh said quietly, pointing toward the distant stone structure. "But the path is treacherous. The Fomorians will have laid traps, and their creatures lurk in the shadows." Nuada nodded, his silver arm glinting as he adjusted his grip on the Sword of Light. "Then we move with caution, but we move swiftly. The longer we remain here, the more dangerous it becomes." The group moved silently through the twisted forest that lined the path to the fortress. The trees here were gnarled and blackened, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Strange sounds echoed through the air, whispers, growls, and the distant rumble of thunder. It was clear that the island was under the influence of dark magic, and every step they took brought them closer to its source. As they moved deeper into the island, they encountered the first of the Fomorian defenses: shapeshifters, twisted creatures that could take the form of anything they touched. The shapeshifters lurked in the shadows, waiting for the gods to pass so they could strike from behind. But Brigid, with her keen eyes and sharp instincts, spotted them before they could attack. "They hide in the trees," she whispered to Lugh, "waiting to ambush us." Lugh nodded and raised his spear. With a swift motion, he hurled the spear into the nearest tree, and the creature hiding there let out a screech as it transformed into its true form: a grotesque, misshapen being with eyes that gleamed with malice. The other shapeshifters, seeing their comrade revealed, rushed forward to attack. The battle was swift and brutal. Lugh's spear flew with precision, striking down the creatures before they could get close, while Nuada's sword cut through the air with deadly accuracy. Brigid used her magic to protect the group, casting barriers of light to shield them from the shapeshifters' claws. Dagda, with his great strength, swung his club with force, shattering the creature's bones with each blow. Though the shapeshifters were fierce, they were no match for the combined power of the gods. Within minutes, the creatures were defeated, their bodies dissolving into the ground as the magic that had sustained them faded away. "We must keep moving," Ogma said, his voice steady. "The Fomorians will have sensed our presence by now. There will be more." The group pressed on, following the winding path that led toward the fortress. As they climbed higher, the terrain became more treacherous. The ground was uneven, and jagged rocks jutted out from the earth, making every step dangerous. Above them, dark clouds swirled, and lightning crackled across the sky. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur, and the ground beneath their feet felt hot, as if the island itself was a volcano on the verge of eruption. Finally, they reached the base of the fortress. The stone walls were massive and ancient, covered in strange, arcane symbols that pulsed with dark energy. The gates were guarded by two massive Fomorian beasts, each standing twice the height of a man and covered in thick, scaly armor. Their eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light, and their claws scraped the ground as they patrolled the entrance. "These creatures are not to be taken lightly," Lugh said, eyeing the beasts warily. "But we cannot waste time. We must get inside." Dagda stepped forward, his great club resting on his shoulder. "Leave the beasts to me," he said with a grin. "I've dealt with worse." Before anyone could stop him, Dagda charged forward, his massive form a blur of motion as he swung his club at the nearest beast. The creature roared in fury as the club connected with its side, sending it crashing into the stone wall. But the beast was far from defeated. With a roar, it lunged at Dagda, its claws swiping at his chest. Dagda blocked the attack with his club, the force of the blow sending shock waves through the ground. Meanwhile, the second beast charged at the rest of the group, its massive claws raised to strike. Tuatha met the beast head-on, his sword of light flashing in the stormy air as he deflected the creature's attacks. Lugh joined the fray, his spear flying with deadly precision as he targeted the beast's vulnerable underbelly. The battle was fierce, but the gods were relentless. Dagda, with his immense strength, eventually overpowered the first beast, sending it crashing to the ground with a final, earth-shaking blow. The second beast, weakened by Lugh's spear and Tuatha's sword, collapsed moments later, its body dissolving into the ground like the others before it. With the beasts defeated, the path to the fortress was clear. The gods approached the massive gates which creaked open slowly, as if in response to their presence. Beyond the gates lay the dark heart of the Fomorian stronghold, where the Cauldron of Plenty was kept under heavy guard. As they stepped into the fortress, a sense of foreboding washed over them. They had entered the stronghold of the enemy. Chapter 5. The Battle for the Cauldron. The fortress of the Fomorians was a place unlike any the gods had ever seen. The air inside the walls was thick with the stench of sulfur, and the stone floors were etched with glowing runes that pulsed with dark magic. The corridors twisted and turned in unnatural ways, as if the very architecture was designed to confuse and trap intruders. Every sound echoed, distorted by the magic that permeated the stronghold, making it difficult to tell where their enemies might be lurking. As the gods and warriors moved deeper into the fortress, they knew they were being watched. The shadows shifted unnaturally, and strange whispers filled the air. Whispers that seemed to grow louder the closer they came to the Cauldron of Plenty. They could feel the dark presence of Balor of the Evil Eye, the king of the Fomorians, whose gaze could destroy anything in its path. They had not yet encountered him, but his malevolent energy was palpable, hanging over the fortress like a storm cloud ready to break. At last they reached the heart of the fortress, a massive hall carved from the living rock of the island. At the far end of the chamber, elevated on a platform, stood the Cauldron of Plenty. It was a massive, gleaming object, larger than any man, made of polished bronze and inscribed with ancient Celtic symbols. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, and even from a distance the gods could feel the power radiating from it. This was the source of life, the sacred object that could feed nations and heal the wounded. But it was also the prize that the Fomorians would guard with their lives. Surrounding the cauldron were the Fomorian guards, massive, twisted creatures with grotesque features and weapons forged from the blackest iron. They were the elite warriors of Balor, and they had been tasked with protecting the cauldron at all costs. At the center of the room stood Balor himself, towering over the others, his single eye glowing with a terrifying light. His gaze alone was enough to make the bravest of men tremble, for it was said that anyone who looked into his eye would be struck down instantly. The gods knew that to face Balor and his forces would be the ultimate test of their strength and courage. This was the final battle, the moment that would determine the fate of the Cauldron of Plenty and the future of Ireland. Lugh stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Balor. "We have come for the cauldron," he called out, his voice steady and commanding. "It does not belong to you. Surrender it now, and we may yet spare you." Balor laughed, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the chamber. "Foolish gods," he sneered. "The cauldron belongs to the Fomorians now. You will never take it from us. Your strength is nothing compared to mine, and your light will fade in the face of my eye." With that, Balor raised his hand, and the Fomorian guards rushed forward, weapons drawn. The battle for the cauldron had begun. The gods were ready. Tuatha, with his sword of light, led the charge, cutting through the Fomorian ranks with precision and power. His blade gleamed like the sun, and wherever it struck, the dark magic of the Fomorians was no match for its purity. Dagda, wielding his massive club, fought beside him, each swing of his weapon shattering the iron shields and armor of the Fomorian warriors. His strength was unmatched, and with every blow, the ground beneath them trembled. Lugh, with his mighty spear, moved with the speed of lightning. His spear flew through the air, striking down enemy after enemy, each throw guided by the precision of a master craftsman. No Fomorian could stand against him, and soon the floor of the hall was littered with the bodies of their fallen foes. But for every guard they defeated, more seemed to rise in their place, drawn by the dark magic of the fortress. At the center of the battle, Balor stood, watching the fight unfold with a cold, calculating gaze. He had not yet unleashed the full power of his evil eye, but the gods knew that it was only a matter of time. His presence was a constant threat, a shadow looming over the battlefield, waiting to strike. As the gods pushed forward, they could feel the cauldron's power growing stronger. They were close, so close, but the path was still blocked by the Fomorians. Ogma, the god of strength and wisdom, realized that brute force alone would not be enough to win this battle. They needed a strategy. "Lugh," Ogma called out over the din of battle. "You are the only one who can defeat Balor. His eye is his greatest weapon, but it is also his weakness. We must blind him before he can use it against us." Lugh nodded, understanding immediately. Balor's eye was said to be his source of power, capable of incinerating anyone who dared to stand before him. But if Lugh could strike before Balor had a chance to use his gaze, they might stand a chance. While the others continued to battle the Fomorians, Lugh moved swiftly and silently, positioning himself for the perfect strike. He knew that the only way to defeat Balor was to strike his eye with a precision that only the spear of love could deliver. He crouched behind a pillar, waiting for the moment when Balor's attention would shift. Meanwhile, the battle raged on. Brigid, with her healing powers, moved among the gods, tending to their wounds and casting spells of protection. Her magic was the light in the darkness, keeping them strong and ensuring that no one fell to the Fomorian blades. The room was filled with the clash of metal, the roar of battle, and the crackle of magic as the two forces clashed. Finally, the moment came. Balor, growing impatient with his guards' inability to stop the gods, stepped forward, his eye blazing with power. He prepared to unleash its terrible might upon Tuatha, who was fighting valiantly at the front lines. But before he could open his eye fully, Lugh stepped out from behind the pillar, his spear raised. With all the strength and skill he possessed, Lugh hurled the spear of light directly at Balor's eye. The spear flew through the air, gleaming with divine energy, and struck its target with perfect accuracy. Balor let out a terrible roar as the spear pierced his eye, and a blinding light filled the chamber as his power was shattered. With Balor's defeat, the Fomorian guards faltered. Their dark magic, tied to their king's strength, began to dissipate, and the gods pressed their advantage. One by one, the remaining Fomorians fell, their twisted forms crumbling into dust as the gods claimed victory. The battle was over. The gods had won. With Balor defeated, the path to the Cauldron of Plenty was clear. The gods approached the platform where the cauldron stood, its surface shimmering with a golden light. As they neared it, they could feel its power washing over them, a power of life, healing, and abundance. Dagda, the rightful keeper of the cauldron, stepped forward and placed his hands on its rim. A deep sense of peace and fulfillment filled him as the cauldron recognized its master. The land would be healed, the people fed, and balance restored. "The cauldron is ours once again," Dagda said, his voice filled with reverence. "The land will thrive, and the people will live." The gods stood together, victorious but weary. They had faced the darkness and emerged triumphant. But their journey was not yet complete. They still had to return the cauldron to Ireland, where it would once again serve as a symbol of life and prosperity. With the cauldron reclaimed and the Fomorians defeated, the gods began their journey home, knowing that they had fulfilled their destiny and saved their people. Chapter 6. The Riddle of the Cauldron. As the gods stood before the Cauldron of Plenty, they could feel its immense power radiating from the gleaming bronze surface. It was the source of life itself, a vessel of endless abundance capable of feeding armies and healing the gravest of wounds. Yet something was wrong. Despite their victory over the Fomorians and the defeat of Balor, the cauldron remained dormant, its magic sealed by a powerful spell. Dagda, the cauldron's rightful keeper, placed his hands on the rim, expecting to feel the familiar warmth of its magic coursing through him. But instead, the cauldron remained cold and unresponsive. The gods exchanged worried glances, realizing that their task was not yet complete. The cauldron had been cursed by the Fomorians, and its power would not be restored until they could break the spell. It was Ogma, the god of wisdom and eloquence, who first noticed the inscription on the cauldron's surface. Carved into the bronze were ancient runes, symbols of the otherworld magic that bound the cauldron. Ogma stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concentration as he studied the symbols. The runes formed a riddle, a test of wisdom and understanding that only the most cunning minds could solve. "The cauldron has been bound by a riddle," Ogma said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. The Fomorians knew that strength alone would not be enough to reclaim it. "They have left a challenge for us, one that must be solved if we are to restore its power." The gods gathered around the cauldron, listening closely as Ogma read the riddle aloud. The words, etched in the ancient language of the Tuatha Dé Danann, seemed to shimmer with magic as they were spoken. "In the heart of the earth the sky's light doth hide. To open the cauldron you must set it aside. The path to abundance is neither wealth nor might, but balance of darkness and the shining of light. To heal the land and restore what was done, you must answer the riddle and walk as one." The riddle was complex, filled with metaphors and hidden meanings. The gods knew that the Fomorians had crafted this test to challenge not only their intelligence, but also their understanding of the natural world, and the balance between life and death. "What does it mean?" Nuada asked, his silver arm resting on the hilt of his sword. "We have defeated the Fomorians. We have proven our strength. What more is required of us?" Ogma frowned, his mind working quickly to unravel the layers of meaning in the riddle. "It speaks of balance," he said thoughtfully. "The cauldron's power is not merely in its ability to feed and heal. It is tied to the cycles of life and death, creation and destruction. The Fomorians sought to upset that balance, but to restore it, we must look beyond strength and wealth. We must understand the harmony that exists between opposites." Brigid, the goddess of healing and wisdom, stepped forward. "The cauldron is more than a vessel for food and life," she said softly. "It represents the interconnectedness of all things, light and dark, life and death, order and chaos. To unlock its power, we must embrace both sides of that balance." "But how do we do that?" asked Lugh, his brow furrowed. "The riddle speaks of setting aside the sky's light. What does that mean?" Ogma's eyes lit up with understanding. "The sky's light is a metaphor for the sun, for life and growth. But it also speaks of the earth, of the darkness that lies beneath. The cauldron's power cannot be restored by simply forcing light into it. We must acknowledge the importance of both the darkness and the light, of the death that gives way to life." Dagda, listening carefully, nodded in agreement. "The cauldron's power comes from the earth as much as it does from the sky. Without the death of winter, there is no spring. Without the night, there is no day. We must honor both." Understanding dawned on the group as they realized the solution to the riddle. The cauldron's power could not be restored through brute force or wealth, nor could it be controlled by any single force. The balance between light and dark, life and death, was essential to its magic. To unlock it, they would need to perform a ritual that acknowledged both the light of the sun and the darkness of the earth. The gods gathered in a circle around the cauldron, each of them representing a different aspect of the natural world. Nuada, with his sword of light, embodied the strength of the sun. Dagda, the god of abundance, symbolized the life-giving power of the earth. Brigid represented healing and balance, while Lugh stood for skill and cunning. Ogma, as the god of wisdom, guided them in their understanding of the riddle. As they stood around the cauldron, they began to recite an ancient chant, calling upon the forces of both the sky and the earth. The air around them grew thick with magic as their voices rose in unison, and the cauldron began to glow faintly, as if responding to their words. The chant continued, growing louder and more powerful. The gods focused their energy, channeling their understanding of balance and harmony into the cauldron. The light of Nuada's sword mixed with the warmth of the earth beneath Dagda's feet, and the magic of the cauldron began to stir. Then, at the height of the chant, Brigid stepped forward and placed her hands on the cauldron's rim. She closed her eyes and spoke the final words of the ritual, invoking the balance of life and death, light and darkness. As she did, the cauldron erupted with light, filling the chamber with a blinding glow. For a moment, the entire fortress seemed to tremble as the cauldron's power was restored. The curse of the Fomorians had been broken, and the Cauldron of Plenty once again pulsed with the magic of life. Its surface shimmered with golden light, and the gods could feel its energy coursing through them. "The balance has been restored," Brigid said quietly, her voice filled with reverence. "The cauldron is ours once more." The gods stood together, triumphant. They had solved the riddle, not with strength or force, but with wisdom and understanding. The power of the cauldron had been returned to the land, and the balance between light and dark had been preserved. But their journey was not yet over. They still had to return the cauldron to Ireland, where it would once again serve as a symbol of prosperity and abundance. The land would be healed, the people fed, and the Tuatha Dé Danann would reign once more. With the cauldron glowing with newfound power, the gods prepared to leave the island of the Fomorians, knowing that their victory was only the beginning of a new era for their people. Chapter 7. The Return of the Cauldron. The journey back to Ireland was far different from the perilous voyage they had undertaken to reach the island of the Fomorians. The sea, which had once churned with malice and treachery, now seemed calm, as if the waters themselves recognized the triumph of the Tuatha Dé Danann. The Cauldron of Plenty, now fully restored to its former glory, sat in the center of the ship, its golden glow radiating warmth and life. The gods and warriors felt the cauldron's power coursing through them, and the sense of renewal was palpable. They knew they were bringing more than just a magical artifact back to Ireland. They were bringing hope. As the ship sailed smoothly across the open sea, Dagda stood at the helm, his hand resting on the cauldron. The father of the gods was filled with a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the balance of the world had been restored. With the cauldron's return, the famine that had plagued the land would end, and the people of Ireland would once again thrive. The journey had been long and dangerous, but their efforts had not been in vain. Lugh, ever watchful, stood at the bow of the ship, his keen eyes scanning the horizon. Though the Fomorians had been defeated, Lugh knew that the forces of chaos were never truly vanquished. There would always be new challenges, new enemies that sought to disrupt the delicate balance the gods had fought so hard to protect. But for now, there was peace, and Lugh allowed himself a moment to breathe in the cool sea air. As they neared the shores of Ireland, the familiar green hills and rocky cliffs came into view, and a sense of relief washed over the crew. The land had been waiting for their return, and as the ship approached the shore, they could see the people gathering to greet them. News of their victory had spread quickly, and the people of Ireland, who had suffered so greatly in the absence of the cauldron's power, now came to witness its return. When the ship docked at the shores of Brú na Bóinne, the gods disembarked with the cauldron carried high between them. The people bowed in reverence, their eyes wide with awe as the gods walked among them, the cauldron glowing with a golden light that seemed to banish the shadows of hardship from the land. Dagda, Lugh, Nuada, Brigid, and Ogma led the procession as they carried the cauldron to its rightful place. As they traveled through the countryside, the cauldron's power began to work its magic. The fields, once dry and barren, now sprang to life with green shoots and blossoming flowers. The rivers, which had run low during the famine, filled with clear, sparkling water. The people, who had grown thin and weary, felt the warmth of the cauldron's energy rejuvenating them. Children laughed and danced in the streets, their faces alight with joy as they watched the gods return with the symbol of life and abundance. The journey from the shore to Brú na Bóinne was a celebration, with the people of Ireland lining the roads to catch a glimpse of the cauldron and the gods who had returned it. Musicians played songs of victory, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of newly blooming flowers. For the first time in many months, hope and joy had returned to the land. At last, the gods reached Brú na Bóin, the sacred site where the cauldron would be kept safe for generations to come. This ancient site, built by the Tuatha Dé Danann long ago, was a place of great power, where the magic of the land was strongest. The gods carried the cauldron to the center of the great stone chamber, placing it upon the altar that had been prepared for it. Dagda stepped forward, his voice filled with authority as he spoke the words of consecration. The Cauldron of Plenty has returned to its rightful place. Let it be a symbol of abundance and prosperity for the people of Ireland. Let it heal the land and feed the hungry. Let its magic flow through the earth, bringing balance and harmony to all. As Dagda spoke, the cauldron glowed brighter, and a soft hum filled the air. The magic of the cauldron spread outward, touching every corner of the land. The gods could feel the cauldron's power flowing through the earth, restoring what had been lost. The fields would yield crops again, the rivers would run clear, and the people would thrive under the protection of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Brigid, with her wisdom and healing powers, knelt beside the cauldron and placed her hands on its rim. She spoke words of blessing, ensuring that the cauldron's magic would not only bring abundance but also healing to those in need. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of the gods' promise to their people. May this cauldron be a source of life for all who dwell in this land. May it heal the sick, feed the hungry, and restore balance to the earth. The gods stood together, their task complete. They had journeyed across dangerous seas, fought against dark forces, and solved the riddle of the cauldron. Now, their victory would bring prosperity to the land for generations to come. The people of Ireland, their faith in the gods restored, would honor the Tuatha Dé Danann as the protectors of the land. The cauldron, now safe in its sacred place, would once again serve as a symbol of the balance between life and death, light and dark. The gods had proven that true strength came not from wealth or power, but from understanding and harmony. The people would thrive, the land would flourish, and the balance of the world would remain intact. As the gods left Brú na Bóin, they knew that the world would always present new challenges, but they also knew that, together, they could overcome them. The Cauldron of Plenty was more than just a magical artifact. It was a reminder of the importance of balance, wisdom, and unity. And so, with the cauldron returned and the land healed, the gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann returned to their eternal watch over Ireland, knowing that their people were safe and their world was in harmony once more. Chapter 8. The Legacy of the Cauldron. With the Cauldron of Plenty safely restored to its rightful place in Brú na Bóin, peace and prosperity returned to the land of Ireland. The victory over the Fomorians and the reclamation of the cauldron would be remembered as one of the greatest triumphs in the long history of the Tuatha Dé Danann. But more than that, it would become a symbol of the eternal balance between life and death, light and darkness, abundance and loss, principles that guided the natural world and the lives of all who dwelt within it. As the seasons passed, the cauldron's magic spread far and wide, its influence felt in every corner of the island. The fields that had once lain barren now burst with crops, feeding the people with an abundance of grain, fruit, and vegetables. The rivers, once parched and dry, now flowed with fresh, crystal-clear water that nourished the earth and the animals. The forests, which had begun to wither under the curse of the Fomorians, grew tall and lush again, providing shelter and resources for the people of Ireland. But the cauldron's power extended beyond mere sustenance. It had the ability to heal wounds, both physical and spiritual, and its magic brought renewal to the hearts of those who had suffered during the dark times. Those who were sick or injured came to Brú na Bóinne to receive its blessing, and under the watchful eye of Brigid, the goddess of healing, they were restored to health. The people's faith in the gods was reaffirmed, and they gave thanks to the Tuatha Dé Danann for their protection and guidance. The story of the quest for the cauldron spread across Ireland, passed down from one generation to the next in songs, poems, and stories. Bards traveled from village to village, recounting the heroic deeds of Dagda, Lugh, Nuada, Brigid, and Ogma, and the great battle against the Fomorians. The tale became a cornerstone of Irish mythology, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the gods would never abandon their people. The Cauldron of Plenty itself became a powerful symbol of the land's prosperity and the gods' favor. It was revered not only as an artifact of magic, but as a representation of the delicate balance that sustained all life. The people understood that just as the cauldron could provide endless bounty, so too could it withhold it if the balance of the natural world was disrupted. They learned to live in harmony with the land, honoring the cycles of the seasons and the interconnectedness of all living things. Among the gods, the journey to reclaim the cauldron had strengthened their bonds. Dagda, the great father of the gods, had proven once again his role as protector of life and abundance. Lugh, the master of all crafts, had shown his unmatched skill and leadership in defeating Balor of the Evil Eye. Nuada, with his sword of light, had led the charge in battle, while Brigid had used her wisdom and compassion to heal and guide them all. Ogma, with his strength and intellect, had deciphered the riddle that had sealed the cauldron's power. Together, they had restored balance to Ireland, and their legacy would endure for all time. But the legacy of the Cauldron of Plenty was not only one of power and magic, it was also a lesson in humility. The gods had learned that strength alone could not reclaim the cauldron, and that wisdom and understanding were just as important as physical prowess. The riddle of the cauldron had tested not only their minds but their hearts, forcing them to confront the deeper truths of the world they governed. For the Tuatha Dé Danann, the cauldron became a reminder of the importance of balance in all things. The gods understood that their rule over the land was not absolute, and that they too were bound by the laws of nature. The Fomorians, though defeated, represented the ever-present forces of chaos and destruction, forces that could never be fully eradicated, but only held in check by the balance maintained by the gods and the people. As the years passed, the Cauldron of Plenty continued to provide for the people of Ireland, and the land flourished under the protection of the Tuatha Dé Danann. The story of the quest became a part of the people's cultural heritage, a symbol of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between the gods and the land. But the gods knew that the world was always changing, and that new challenges would arise. The balance they had fought so hard to restore would need to be maintained for generations to come. The Cauldron of Plenty, though powerful, was not a guarantee of eternal peace. It was a tool, a gift from the gods that could only be sustained through wisdom, unity, and respect for the natural world. And so, the gods remained ever vigilant, watching over the land and its people, ready to intervene when needed, but trusting in the wisdom they had imparted to the humans. The Cauldron of Plenty remained in Brú na Bóinne, guarded by the Tuatha Dé Danann, its power flowing through the earth and into the hearts of the people. The legacy of the cauldron was one of hope, balance, and abundance, a reminder that even in the face of darkness and despair, the light of life could always be restored, so long as there were those willing to fight for it. The quest for the Cauldron of Plenty became one of the most celebrated legends in Celtic mythology, a story that embodied the timeless values of courage, wisdom, and the pursuit of balance. The gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann had proven their worth as protectors of the land, and the people of Ireland flourished under their guidance. But the true legacy of the cauldron went beyond its magical powers. It was a symbol of the natural order, a reminder that life and death, light and darkness, abundance and scarcity were all part of the same cycle. The gods, in reclaiming the cauldron, had reaffirmed their commitment to maintaining that balance, and the people had learned to live in harmony with the world around them. For generations to come, the story of the Cauldron of Plenty would inspire those who sought to understand the deeper mysteries of life and the forces that shaped their world. It was a story of triumph, not only over external enemies, but over the internal struggles that defined the human condition, the need for balance, wisdom, and unity in the face of adversity. And so, the cauldron remained a beacon of hope, a symbol of the enduring connection between the gods and the people, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always the possibility of renewal and growth. The Tuatha Dé Danann had reclaimed their treasure, and with it they had restored the balance of the world.